Welcome to Murder and Everything Else. My name is Joy.
And my name is Cheryl, and Joy and I are two very old friends who are going to talk about murder and everything else. So, Joy, you know what happened to me a little while ago? I told you about it, but I'm going to share it with everyone now. I was part of my second data breach in 6 months, and I'm starting to become a pro at changing all of my GD passwords because the first time I had to do it, it took me 3 hours to change all of my passwords.
Whoa.
And then this time it took me an hour and a half. Um,
Oh,
but unfortunately, I'm becoming a pro at it because these large companies keep having data breaches. And I have been using um, a identity monitoring service for 12 years. I'm going to give a little shout out. Identity Guard. I've really loved their service, and they haven't I've used them for over a decade, and they haven't shot up a lot in price. I mean, they have to increase their prices, over 12 years. You got to figure you're going to increase, but they're really good service. And then they said, I already had a message from the phone company, who shall remain nameless, that this breach happened with. And then my my security company sent me a thing, and they were like, we recommend. Well, first of all, they said your email and your social security is on the
whoa.
dark web, is on the dark web. And whenever you hear dark web, that's dark. And so I was like, I have to change everything. It was like 5:30 in the freaking morning, and I changed them all. And then I called because they also said you should freeze your credit. And I'm like, yeah, no, do that. But right off of their webpage, you can freeze the Experian. Ex-
Huh.
Experian, yeah, Experian, TransUnion, all that stuff, but it's Experian. But yeah, it's pretty scary.
That is
Um,
scary.
I heard that 73 million customers, past and present, past customers. That's freaking scary. Like you're not even with
Whoa.
them anymore. Yeah. Anywho,
That's
um,
crazy. I
right
I
in.
had one data breach like 5 or 6 years ago, and I still haven't changed some of those passwords.
I wish I could throw caution to the wind and live dangerously, but nope. I get a pit in my stomach when I get that kind of news. Mm-mm-mm. Oh,
You
oh, and then somebody was trying to buy music off of Amazon, off my Amazon account, so I had to change that. But thank
no
God
way.
for, yeah, yeah, way. But good thing that we now have like, oh, did you just hear crinkling? I was just crinkling something. I'm sorry. We now have that two-step or even more, but those two-step
God.
verification process. I know it's listen, everybody, it seems
I
annoying. It
Guys, I have
seems
a recommendation for the two-step. Make your password and make the pin 1 2 3 4. You'll never forget it.
no, 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 because these so when you try to change something or log into something, it's sometimes the verification is a code that's texted to you, or an email that says, you have to click on this or enter this code. So the code is sent either text or email. And so I got
Hmm.
the email saying there's an attempt, a sign-on attempt at Amazon Music.
Huh.
If this is you, verify this code. If not, And so two people, one was in it, both out of this country, in foreign countries,
Huh.
two different countries. So thank God. I'm giving a lot of shout outs.
Was one of the
Shout.
countries Estonia?
No, it was not. I can't remember, but it was not. I would have remembered if it was Estonia. But anyway, so shout out to my identity guard company, and shout out to two-step verification. I'm telling you guys, it's going to save you from being hacked. And that's all I got to say about that.
All right. Thanks, Cheryl. We've
You're
got some
welcome.
updates today. I checked in with Gabe. If you listened to last week's episode, we had a question about when you die, and if you have an erection when you die, will it deflate or will it stay hard because of rigor mortis? And he said that when you die, if you have an erection, it will deflate. So you heard it here first. If you had the same question as Cheryl and I, now it's
You
been
wait a
answered.
minute. You said we had a question. No, you had a question.
Yeah, but you said to ask Gabe. And then
Oh, I
I
did say
called
that.
him at work and asked him, and he laughed so hard that I think it was actually really good in hindsight to, like, you know, you don't always have a day at work where you're laughing. Sometimes
Your
you
belly
go to work
laughing.
and you just want to cry. Right.
Right, true.
So we are here to ask the hard questions, guys. So if you have a question that you'd like to ask Gabe, please email us at murderandeverythingelse@gmail.com. We've been doing this for almost a year and a half, and I definitely feel smarter having him as a subject matter expert on erections and death.
And if birds do it. Um, so we should start. Give us your feedback. Do you want us to start a segment like Dear Abby for those of you of a certain age, but we'll call it
Dear
Dear
Gabe.
Gabe? And then you can write in your questions. That'll be
Yeah.
fun.
Also, if you guys noticed that my voice is a little bit scratchy today, it's because I have a little cold.
Again.
I'm I'm sucking on some lozenges. I've also shoved them up my nose because I figure if it's good for your throat, it must be good for your nose. So that's why my voice is wonky today. But also, if you listen to last week's episode, which is the Michael Peterson murder episode, Cheryl and I recorded using a platform that we had started out using that we no longer use. And I accidentally, because we had to kind of like switch gears at the ninth hour, I recorded using my phone instead of our like high powered, super fancy schmancy microphones. And so it was a lapse in technical expertise, and that's why it sounded shitty. So that's the explanation for that. Cheryl, you got any updates?
I do have an update. So, you guys, we really do need to start a segment. Are you okay?
I'm
Um,
just I'm just
you're
over
just
here
dying.
dying. But don't worry, I don't have an erection.
Oh my God. Well, we do need to start a segment called Dear Gabe because so Gabe informed me that the series Warrior, which I spoke about, I don't know how long ago, months and months and months, was
No,
actually.
it was just last Michael Peterson's episode.
Oh, did I really talk about Warrior in that? What was
Yeah,
I
you
talking
talked
about?
about because I was talking about Shogun, and you talked about Warrior
Oh,
and how they do
you
this cool
guys.
thing with the language.
That's right. Thank you. You know what?
Jesus,
A week is a very long time. I don't remember what I said a week ago.
very.
Anywho, I have referred to the Asian people, the Asian persuasion people in that show as Korean, and they are Chinese. So my apologies, and I'm making a correction right now.
All right. Thanks for that retraction, Cheryl. Rolling on to shout outs. Guys, I have to just shout out the Chatham Heating and Air Company. If you live in my neck of the woods, you need to check these people out. So, one of the things that we noticed is when the weather starts getting hot, which we had a little like chunk of like high 80-degree days. We've gotten cooler again this week, but um it's kind of uncharacteristic for it to be that hot here, early in the spring.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
in our bedroom, it gets like 10 degrees hotter. And so he called them and said, you guys need to come out and check our air. And they actually made some recommendations to him that he could try first. And so he tried them and it fixed the problem. And because, they charge you a surcharge, just a service charge just for coming to your house.
Yeah. A
And so,
diagnostic charge.
yeah, so they
Uh-huh.
they cut they cut themselves. I want to say last summer or the one before it was around $120. They cut themselves out of getting that $120, but also it was incredibly honest for them to do something like that, which means, the next time we need heating and air, we're going to go with them. So thank you to Chatham Heating and Air. I know you guys don't know that you're getting this shout out and you probably don't listen to this podcast, but if you have problems with your air conditioning, call those people. They're honest and they are not looking to just gouge you for a service charge. So
That's
thanks.
awesome.
Any shout outs for you, Cheryl?
Okay, well, Joy, your thing is shoes, right? Everybody, we know that Joy loves to buy shoes and purses. And
Shoes.
I know I've said it before on this on our podcast, but Joy, what is it that I love to buy that I can't help myself from buying?
Crunchwrap Supremes.
Exactly.
Wait,
Um
wait, oh wait. Cut Crunchwrap Supremes and dildos.
and I love to buy things for my dogs. Well, when I had dogs plural, but now I have Callie and I just bought her yet another ID tag. And these tags are made of resin and they have all these cute little decorations in them. And then uh this seller uses beads for the letters. It's super cute. And then you can put a number on the back for emergency. There's a lot of sellers on Etsy, and I'm sure there's a lot of wonderful ones out there, but I want to give a shout out to the girl that I buy from. Her name is Ashley, and her Etsy shop is called Glitter and the Girl. And it's very sweet stuff. She also makes keychains and cell phone cases. And if you like glitter and you like cute things, check it out. Glitter and the Girl on Etsy.
Ooh, nice. You know what my kid's been doing, Cheryl? She's been making nails and selling them on this site called Depop, which is like a younger person's kind of eBay.
Oh, what's it
Yeah,
called? Depop?
Depop. Yeah, she's
Huh.
been selling like, gently worn items that she doesn't wear anymore. And she started making these cute nails and selling them on there. So, you can go and buy a bedazzled pair of nails. It reminds me, like when you talk about these resin tags, it reminds me of these bedazzled nails.
Oh, you're gonna have to send me the link. We need to somehow put
All
the
right.
link up for people to
I
see.
know. That's
Yeah.
right. And for those of you listening, I still have that Gucci bag on eBay. So hit me up if you want a Gucci bag. All right. Anywho, this week we are heading right back to Cheryl's favorite, which is murder. And what
Red
do you have
rum.
for us? What do you have for us, Cheryl?
Well, remember I mentioned that I want to do the trifecta of Petersons. Um, and what's in a Peterson name? Because we had Michael Peterson, and there's Drew Peterson, which will come in a couple of weeks. But today we are talking about the infamous Scott Peterson and the murder of Laci Peterson, his wife. So I believe we all know this story, but we're going to talk about it today because I want to get your feedback. Like I said, when I wanted to do this podcast, it was because I wanted to discuss with you old cases, new cases, doesn't matter. Just want to get your thoughts on things. So, my sources were imdb.com, ABC News, Wikipedia, USA Today, People, and ABC News. Let me tell you, I had to use a lot of sources because I try to fact check myself as much as possible, you guys, but I got to tell you, um, there was conflicting information. I wanted to know who reported her missing, and I could not nail it down. It was like her
Uh,
mother, her sister, her this, her that. So I'm just want to make that disclaimer right now that I did my best to get the most accurate information, but you know, not everything you read on the internet is true. Anyway, Let's talk about Laci
Cheryl.
Denise Peterson, right? Laci Denise Peterson. Laci was born on May 4th, 1975, to Sharon Anderson and Dennis Robert Rocha, who had met in high school and owned a dairy farm west of Escalon, California. Laci's older brother, Brett Rocha, was born in 1971. Laci worked on the farm from a young age and also enjoyed gardening with her mother. Sharon and Dennis divorced when Laci and her brother were young. Sharon and the children moved to Modesto, California. The children visited the dairy farm on weekends. Sharon eventually married Ron Gransky, who helped raise Laci and Brent from the time Laci was 2 years old. Laci was a cheerleader in high school and junior high. And after graduating from Thomas Downey High School, she attended California Polytechnic State University, also known as Cal Poly, majoring in
That's in
ornamental
San. That's in
horticulture,
San. That's in San Luis Obispo.
which is that's a very pretty area, isn't it?
Oh, it's so pretty on the coast. That's a
So
good school.
she majored in ornamental horticulture. Do you know what that is?
Yeah, so horticulture is the study of plants. So it's basically farming. Ornamental would mean that she studied plants that are grown in the hothouse, like flowers that you use for um flower arrangements and things like that. And
Okay, awesome.
also like orchids and all that kind of stuff. Anything that's like not edible because it's ornamental.
And I don't have a green thumb. Do you?
Um I okay, it's a really long answer, but let's just say this. If a plant is not resilient, I can kill it.
Well, let's just say this. For me, if a plant is resilient, I can still kill it. Um, so let's talk about Scott Lee Peterson. Scott was born on October 24th, 1972, in San Diego, California, to Lee Arthur Peterson, who owned a crate packaging company, and Jackie Helen Latham, who owned a boutique in La Jolla called The Put On. Lee and Jackie had 6 children from previous relationships. Scott was their only child together. Scott began playing golf at an early age, and by age 14, he could beat his father at the game. For a time, Scott had dreams of becoming a professional golfer. In 1990, Scott enrolled at Arizona State University on a partial golf scholarship. He was kicked off the team because they had gone on some recruit trip, and he went out drinking with one of the other members, and the father was mad about that and reported him to the
Mm.
complained to the state Arizona State golf coach. Anyway, so he got kicked off the team, and then he transferred to Cuesta College and then to Cal Poly State University. While at Cal Poly, Scott worked at a Pacific Cafe, a restaurant in Morro Bay. Morro Bay is really pretty. Have you ever been there?
Beautiful. Yeah, we went
Yeah.
and took the kids when they were little, and they'd never stayed in a hotel before, and all they wanted to do was
Aw.
go get ice out of the ice machine and sit on the floor of the hotel room and watch cartoons and eat ice.
Oh, that sounds like fun.
Well,
Remember when like staying in a hotel was fun and now all I see are germs? I mean, that's all I can imagine are germs in the unwashed like mattress that's been there for years and whatever.
and that's when you have to
Anyway,
bring your black light.
yeah. Oh no, that's when you know you don't want it because then you'll never sleep. You got to sleep standing up. Um,
Yep.
Lacey, so he worked at a place called Pacific Cafe, a restaurant, and Lacey would occasionally visit the restaurant to see a friend who also worked there. In mid 1994, Lacey sent Scott her phone number. She also told her mother that she had met the man that she would marry, which is so sad looking back on that, knowing what happens later. Scott later called Lacey and they began dating. As the relationship grew more serious, Scott put aside his dreams of professional golf in order to focus on a business career. The couple then dated for 2 years and eventually moved in together. In 1997, after Lacey graduated, they married. The couple soon opened a popular restaurant near the college campus, which they ran for 2 years. They sold the business and moved to an upscale section of Modesto, California to start a family. Scott landed a job as sales manager for a fertilizer manufacturer while Lacey stayed at home. Lacey's family, including her mother and younger sister, said that she devoted much of her energy towards being the perfect housewife and that she enjoyed cooking, entertaining, and watching Martha Stewart. After the couple tried for more than a year to conceive, Lacey Peterson eventually became pregnant in May 2002. She was thrilled at the prospect of becoming a mother. She soon learned that she was expecting a baby boy, and the couple selected the name Connor and began decorating a nursery for him. In November 2002, Scott was introduced by a friend to Amber Frey. Fry? I forgot to look up how you
Right.
pronounce that.
It's
Frey?
Frank. I remember following parts of this story at the time it was unfolding.
Yeah, I know she was all over and could not. It's spelled as Frey, but I couldn't remember if they were saying Fry. My apologies. I totally meant to listen to how it was said. Anyway, so Scott was introduced to her by a friend, and she was a Fresno massage therapist, and the two began a romantic relationship. Now, I have to question this friend. Did he or she not know that he was married? I mean, if you're a friend of
Uh,
the person, wouldn't you know if they were married? I don't know. I have questions about that.
I, I I don't know. I mean, but just remember, she was a massage therapist, and so it could have been like Scott said, "Oh, I need a massage. My back is hurting." You know.
Right, you're right. Because it just, yeah, it just says that he was introduced by a friend to Amber Frey.
And
So,
the other thing is, I tend to think because of like all the details surrounding the case that Scott probably presented himself as a single guy.
but if it was a friend of his, he would know, wouldn't he? The friend, he or she would know. But
Yeah,
you're
but
right. It was,
maybe it was one of those things where he's like, "Oh, I know a girl who does massage. Her name's Amber. She's really good." And then if you don't run into Amber again, you know that you because remember this was all pretty like it all happened so quickly.
yeah, no, you're right. But it might have just been, it might have been innocent. Just he saying, "Here's a massage therapist if you want to use one." And
Hmm.
then he ended up lying to her. But okay, so now it's December 23rd, 2002. So it's only a month after he meets Amber, which is so fast. Um, so December 23rd, 2002 at 5:45 p.m., Laci and Scott went to the hair salon where Laci's stepsister, Amy Rocha, worked. Amy cut Laci and Scott's hair as she did each month. Scott offered to pick up a fruit basket that Amy had ordered because he would be playing golf the next day at a course near the retailer. Laci's mother, Sharon, spoke with Laci on the telephone around 8:30 that evening. The last three people known to have spoken to Laci before she disappeared were Amy, Sharon, and Scott. The next day, December 24th, 2002, several neighbors reported seeing the couple's dog, Mackenzie, wandering by herself outside between 10:15 and 10:45 a.m. Later, Scott returned home to find the dog in their backyard, Laci's car in the driveway, and the house empty. After showering and changing his clothes, he knocked on a neighbor's door to ask if they had seen his wife. He then called Sharon, Laci's mom, asking if Laci was with her. This is when it was discovered that Laci was nowhere to be found, and both Scott and her stepfather reported her missing to Modesto police around 6 p.m. After Laci vanished, Amber Frey, Scott's mistress, saw a news article about the case. She immediately contacted the Modesto Police Department hotline. At the authorities' request, she began recording her phone calls with Peterson. Scott told me he was not married, Frey said in a press conference. We had a romantic relationship. I'm very sorry for Laci's family and the pain this has caused them. On April 13, 2003, a couple walking their dog discovered the body of a late term male fetus in San Francisco Bay. A day later, the body of a recently pregnant woman washed onto the shore 1 mile away from where the baby's body was found. DNA tests verified that they were the bodies of Laci and Connor Peterson. Authorities were unable to determine a cause of death because the bodies were badly decomposed, and Laci's body was missing her head and both forearms. Scott Peterson was then arrested on April 18, 2003, near a golf course. Although he claimed to be meeting his father and brother to play golf, he had survival gear, camping equipment, Viagra, $15,000 in cash, two driver's licenses, and four cell phones in his Mercedes. His naturally dark hair had been dyed blonde. Police saw these items as an indication that he was planning to flee to Mexico. You think? He was charged with two felony counts of murder with premeditation and special circumstances. He pleaded not guilty. Now, these people who claim like it's shades of OJ. Remember when he was found in the Bronco and he had cash and a disguise and all this stuff, and then they're like, "I'm not guilty." I mean, do you think anybody that's not who's innocent would display this kind of behavior? Do you think
Yeah.
you
They found them with $10,000 cash. I cleaned up the bank account. I took all the passports and the birth certificates and the driver's licenses and the blah blah blah. And I was just gonna go to church and then the grocery store. I'm like, shut the fuck up.
I mean, it's incredible. Like camping equipment, Viagra, um,
Yeah.
driver's licenses, four cell phones. I mean, he dyed his hair, and then it's like, I'm not guilty. I don't know. I just why would you even? Why would you?
Crazy.
So on June 1st, 2004, Scott Peterson's murder trial began. Laci Peterson's family and the district attorney sought the death penalty for Scott. Lacking
Here's
direct
the thing.
evidence.
I just want to jump in here.
Yeah, yeah. Jump.
Remember, December 2002 was when Laci Peterson went missing. It
Mhm.
wasn't until April of 2003 they discovered the bodies, decomposed bodies.
Correct. Correct.
And then it wasn't until June of 2004. It's so interesting how, and I will say, a lot of this I think has to do with technology. That was pretty quick. Like, if you think about the turnaround time from the time that the bodies were found to when they went to trial, you look
Trial.
at something like Brian Koberger,
Oh
how
yeah.
long has it been? It's been a minute. It's been at least 2 years, and we're nowhere closer to going to trial. And I think, don't you think technology plays a huge part? Because they have so much more stones to overturn. They have more forensic evidence. They have video surveillance. They have cell phone tower surveillance. They have text messages. They have social media um presence that they have to comb through. I
Mhm.
mean, there's so much more stuff that has to be gone through. And I feel like, I mean, this was pretty quick.
Yeah. No, you're right. I was watching a trial. I don't know if it's the treadmill abuse trial. Anyway, where the the detectives had to go through like 60,000 texts or pages of text. I mean, imagine they have to have someone sit their butt down and read through all those texts. So it's a lot of manpower. You're right. We have more technology and more means of surveilling someone and more ways, with DNA and all this stuff. But it also means there's more people that need to be involved to go through all this stuff. And yeah, yeah. But the thing with this is that it's
Right.
mostly um, it with this case, it's a lot of circumstantial evidence, which people are, you know, they are imprisoned and they are found guilty for circumstantial evidence. Um, but that is the benefit of us having this advanced technology and advanced ways of really proving beyond a reasonable doubt and securing a conviction. I mean, of course, there are people that are still wrongly convicted, but I think it's definitely a plus that we have all these other means to prove someone's guilty, to make sure we're not imprisoning someone that is actually
Right.
innocent. Because this case really is based on pretty much, it's just circumstantial evidence. So, lacking direct evidence to link Scott to the crime, prosecutors chiefly relied on circumstantial evidence, like I said, pointing in particular to Scott's behavior before and after Laci's disappearance. Through various witnesses, the prosecution suggested Scott had several motives for killing Laci: that he was tired of his marriage, that he felt pressure from her pregnancy, that he wanted to continue his affair with Amber Frey, and that he was under mounting financial pressure. Prosecutors claimed Scott had made cement anchors to weigh his wife's body down in San Francisco Bay. So, on the morning of December 24th, 2002, when the day Laci went missing, Scott Peterson claimed to have left Laci, his 8.5-month pregnant wife, preparing to do some intense house cleaning while he stopped off at his warehouse and then went fishing. Peterson would later tell authorities that he decided to take an impromptu fishing trip to Berkeley Marina, around 90 miles away, and passed several other more convenient bodies of water. He had previously told multiple neighbors and relatives that he planned to go golfing that day, and later lied to some of them about where he'd gone. Remember, and he also told the stepsister when they went to get their haircut. He was like, I'll pick up the fruit cake or whatever it was fruit
Oh, yeah,
something.
yeah.
And because he was like, I'm going to go golfing and it's near that store. So, as an explanation, he would claim to the police, this is what he told the police, that he decided it was too cold to go golfing. So, by his telling, he spontaneous.
Spontaneously.
I'll be right back, folks. Oh my God. All of a sudden, that word looked completely like it was in another language. He just spontaneously decided to go sit on a boat on the windy bay in 40-degree weather instead. So he tells the police that it was too cold to go golfing, but he goes fishing instead in 40-degree weather. But nothing about the trip to the marina was spontaneous. Peterson, who was not a regular fisherman, he hadn't had a regular fishing license since 1994, began researching fishing boats to buy on December 7th, 2002. On December 8th, he did extensive web searches for fishing supplies and tidal currents around the Bay Area, even zooming in on Brooks Island, where authorities believe he took Laci's body on Christmas Eve. He paid
Wow.
cash for a small fishing boat on December 9th, the same day that he told Amber Frey that he had lost his wife and that this would be his first Christmas without her. I um I I think I heard somewhere along these years about him saying he lost his wife. Like there is a double entendre there, right? Because Amber Frey took it to mean that she died, she passed away. When you say you lost someone, right? It's usually that's what you mean. So she thought he was
Yeah.
a widower. Um, but he meant that she was lost
Yeah.
because he made her lost. So on December 23rd, the day before his supposedly unplanned fishing trip, he purchased a fishing license valid for 2 days only. Although he originally lied and told police he left home on Christmas Eve at 9:30 a.m., cell phone records placed him at or near home at 10:08 a.m., just 10 minutes before a neighbor found Laci's dog running loose in the streets and returned him to the Peterson's yard. So that's how it got in the backyard. The neighbors returned it there. After eventually driving to Berkeley Marina and fishing there for less than an hour, he arrived back home at around 4:30 p.m., washed his fishing clothes, ate some pizza, and then called Laci's mother to tell her that her daughter was missing. Sharon Rocha, and now I've said Rocha and Rocha. I'm so sorry. Sharon Rocha, what do you think it is?
How about Rocca? Roca. Like,
Roca.
remember
Almond Roca.
almond Roca?
Yes. Oh, I love that stuff.
Me
Um,
too.
She testified that when she went to East Laloma Park to search for Laci, she saw Scott there, but she said Scott did not acknowledge her calling out to him, and that he later angled away from her attempts to hug him and failed to attend a candlelight vigil. I mean, how are these actions of an innocent man? Why would you act that way to your mother-in-law? Or can I just like to play devil? I like the devil's advocate side. Like, you know how people always say, well, you never know how someone's going to respond to grief or a traumatic event. Um, so could someone be acting like that if their wife were missing? Would
Well,
you act that?
remember what's his name? Chris Watts and the
Mm-hmm.
recordings of him in the house when he calls, not when someone or him calls 911. He's very kind of agitated. He's not able to sit still, and
Mm-hmm.
he's kind of antsy. So I will say this, because like obviously Scott Peterson's whole thing was like chock full of holes. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, he was sloppy. Let's just put it that way. Um,
But and what? But why wouldn't you try to act normal? See, this is where my mind it goes in circles because I'm thinking, no person in their right mind who killed someone would act so obviously weird. Like he didn't even attend her candlelight vigil. If you killed someone, I'd be like, I better show up, or people are going to think this is weird. So could it
mhm.
be he's innocent and that was his natural reaction? Do you know what I mean? Because
Yeah,
I've
no,
heard
I
of,
do. But I will say also that he's probably, I mean, again, he wasn't. I don't think Scott Peterson had killed anyone before his wife, and he's probably tormented. I could tell you that. Hindsight is 2020. When you think back and look back at, the case, information on the case, just like with Chris Watts, and they look back, he's agitated, he's acting weird, it's like, of course you can say, look, he's not acting normal.
mhm.
So for her to say that he didn't acknowledge her calling out to him and angled away from her attempts to hug him and didn't go to a candlelight vigil, I mean, I remember it's Laci's mom. And then also, you know, anything Scott Peterson does is going to be weird, starting with killing his wife.
Yeah, but what I'm saying, so do all those actions and non-action of him not going to the candlelight vigil, does that lean towards guilt, or is he just that's the way he handled grief?
Well, I don't think you handle grief the same way when you kill someone.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So there's no way he can be in it. But this is what just like baffles my mind. I'm like, why would you not hug? I understand what you're saying because he just killed Laci. So obviously his natural reaction is not to want to hug her mother.
Right.
But but as a rational, aren't you in survival mode? Like, I don't want anybody to find out I did this, so I
Yeah.
better act
I
I
mean,
don't know, it's just
that's
fascinating
what
to me.
that's what you think, but honestly, I mean, because he was pretty sloppy with what he did, especially when this case started to unravel. I mean, the girlfriend right off the bat, it's like, bro, like you are super sloppy. Chris Watts, another example of
Mhm.
someone
A
being very,
mistress
very sloppy. Yeah.
who had a
I'm like,
mistress, yeah.
what? Yeah. And his wife was also pregnant with their third child. I mean,
Oh,
when life is getting you down and out and it's too stressful, here's the
get a
deal.
divorce.
Or go on like a dude's weekend where you go up to the mountains. You don't have to take all the money out of the account. You don't have to take your passports and your driver's licenses. You just take some fishing line and a sleeping bag, couple of six packs of beer, go up there and hang out with your bros, maybe eat too much steak. Someone brings some cigars, and then that's it. You blow off a little steam.
And what like astounds me is Laci is murdered only a month after he started seeing Amber. A month. That is
Yeah.
so quick. Like I can't right now off the top of my head, I don't remember how long Chris had been seeing. I think her name was Nicole. Um, before he killed not just his wife and unborn child, but his two baby girls. Oh my God. So two other relatives of Laci and Scott had shown little, said that they testified that Scott had shown little emotion during Laci's disappearance. Again, that's just weird to me, why you would act like that. And three witnesses testified that Scott had told them he had been golfing, not fishing, after Laci's disappearance. Prosecution called on various witnesses to establish that Scott changed his appearance, purchased a vehicle using his mother's name. I had already spoken about changing his appearance, but apparently he also added two pornographic television channels to his cable service days after his wife's disappearance.
Well, of
A
course he
realtor
did because now he's the single guy.
that is just cuckoo crazy. A
Yep.
realtor testified that in January of 2003, Scott expressed interest in selling the house he had shared with Laci, saying he did not want her to have to live in the home if found alive. Weird. And a
What?
car salesman, yeah, I don't get that. And a car salesman testified that Scott had traded in Laci's Land Rover for a Dodge pickup truck. Amber Frey testified as to her affair with Scott, and the jury heard the secretly recorded telephone calls between the pair. In one, recorded after Laci disappeared, Scott falsely said he was in Paris. As to the Petersons' financial condition, an auditor testified for the prosecution that the couple had been living beyond their means and accumulated $23,000 in credit card debt. During cross examination, however, the auditor also stated that Scott had paid all of his bills on time and had $20,000 of credit available on other cards.
Hmm.
Peterson's blood was found on the door of his truck, for which he gave conflicting explanations. A few drops of blood were also found on their bedroom comforter. Caught in a pair of pliers recovered from Peterson's boat, police found hair matched to Laci's hair through mitochondrial DNA testing, an inconclusive but still genetic match. But Laci allegedly never knew about the boat. Prosecutors also found evidence that he'd made multiple cement anchors, only one of which was located and which they believed he used to weigh down Laci's body. Now, when they say uh, the mitochondrial DNA, I think at the time it wasn't as refined a technique as it is now. Now it's very reliable, but I think back then
Hmm.
it might have been new. So I don't think they were able to conclusively match the hair. Scott's defense lawyers based their case on the lack of direct evidence and played down the significance of circumstantial evidence. The defense suggested the fetal remains were of a full term infant. Listen to this part. The defense suggested that fetal remains were of a full term infant and theorized that someone kidnapped Laci, held her until she gave birth, and then dumped both bodies in the bay. But the
Yeah, because
prosecution's
that makes sense.
Exactly. The prosecution's medical experts contended that the baby was not full term and had died at the same time as his mother. So, getting back to Amber Frey, the California woman who was romantically involved with Scott Peterson, she talked to ABC about secretly working with police to help convict Scott Peterson of murdering his pregnant wife and unborn son. Frey said that on November 20th, 2002, she met Peterson through a mutual friend, like I had mentioned before. She said he told her he wasn't married. Amber said it wasn't until a friend showed her a news article on a missing Modesto woman named Laci Peterson that she learned Scott Peterson was married. Convinced that the man described was her lover, Frey said she immediately called the Modesto Police Department hotline. And the
Good
following day,
for her.
yeah,
Good for
yep,
her. She
she didn't,
deserves a fucking medal for doing that because I'll tell you right now, you don't even have to tell me what they put her through, but I'll guarantee you that she probably, for the next, until he was arrested, felt like her life was on the line. She's dating someone who clearly has murdered their wife and child. And now the only connection to him is through her.
yep, yep, yeah, she was really brave for doing that. I don't want to like bash this other woman, but I know in the Chris Watts case, there's there's a lot of talk about, um, this is not my opinion. I'm just talking about what I've seen on the internet because honestly, I haven't looked into the mistress in that enough to give my own opinion, but I've seen a lot of doubt about whether she knew or not, or whether she possibly, if not had a hand in it, with some influence. I don't know. There's a lot of rumors that are going around about that. So, yeah. So, kudos to Amber Frey for speaking up right away. Um, so the following day, Frey said she reached Detective Albert Brocchini. You think it's Brocchini or Brocchini? Of the Modesto Police Department. I could have looked these things up, but I didn't. I'm sorry. Brocchini and Detective John Bueller met with Frey in person and asked if she would be willing to tape conversations she had with Scott Peterson. The recorded calls continued for nearly 2 months. During one phone conversation, which took place as loved ones gathered for a candlelight vigil in honor of Laci, Scott Peterson told Amber that he was celebrating New Year's Eve in Paris on a business trip. During a press conference on January 24th, 2003, a tearful Frey revealed to the public how she became involved with Scott Peterson. Laci's family, who at first stuck by Scott Peterson during the initial phases of her disappearance, expressed shock at the revelation. Scott told me he was not married, Frey said in front of television cameras. We did have a romantic relationship. I'm very sorry for Laci's family and the pain this has caused them. On November 12, 2004, Peterson was convicted of first-degree murder in Laci's death and second-degree murder for Connor's death. In subsequent interviews, jurors said Peterson's lack of emotion and his behavior with Amber Frey indicated that he was guilty. The judge sentenced Peterson to death, calling Laci and Connor's murder cruel, uncaring, heartless, and callous. So now we're coming to this year, March 5th,
Okay,
2000.
but I'm just curious, why would it be? I understand why it would be first degree murder for Laci because it was premeditated. It was obviously, he planned it, he orchestrated it, and he carried it out. But why second degree murder? Is it because she was carrying Connor?
Yeah, I believe if Connor had been, you know, outside her womb, it would have been two first
Oh,
degree. But I agree with what you're thinking. I mean, it should be first, right? I mean, I that's what we would want, but I understand the law. I mean, that's how the law sees it, which is
here's the
unfortunate.
thing I don't understand. Like, I don't understand where people's minds have to go. And then also, it sounds fairly crazy. So here's the thing, Cheryl. I've
Mm,
been in quite a few, like, situations in my life where I didn't feel like I had an exit door or exit strategy. But at no time have I ever thought, oh, here's what I'll do. I'll get some cement, I'll buy a boat, I'll wait until it's 40 degrees, I'll go out to an island, I'll then conk someone on the head, I'll attach the cement to them, I'll chop off their arms and their head, and then I'll dump the body in the water so that when it washes up, as it's inevitably going to do at some point, they won't be able to figure out who it is because no dental records and
right.
also no fingerprints. Because obviously the guy figured, oh, I'll make it extra difficult for them by not having any fingerprints or any dental records. Because it
Yeah,
doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that's what went through his head. But the
right. Because
thing that's so unbelievable is, guys, if you're at the end of your rope and you feel like you got nowhere to turn, I'm here to tell you sometimes just hanging at the end of the rope is okay. Like, you can just hang out there. I've done it. You wait.
right.
If
Yeah,
you
you're
feel like you're at
absolutely
the
right.
end of your rope, sometimes just hanging out at the end of the rope for 2, 3 days, those turn into a week. That week turns into a month. Shit gets better.
What did I just tell you before we started recording? I told Joy that I
You
watched
told me that
Castaway.
that dildo from Timu stopped working.
No, that is not what I told her. I told her I watched Castaway, the movie Castaway with Tom Hanks for like the umpteenth time. But because of where I am in my life right now, when he spoiler alert, I mean this movie is how old? 20 years old. So if you haven't seen it by now, I'm sorry, but I'm a spoiler alert. He does get rescued from the island. Actually, I think you can get that from the trailers. When he comes back to civilization, I won't tell you this part in case you haven't watched it, but he is talking to a friend and he says that when he was on the island, he just kept breathing. He did lose hope at one point, but he just kept breathing and the sun kept rising. And then he gets back to civilization and he meets some other challenges and hardships. And he says, I just have to keep breathing because you never know what the tide's going to bring in tomorrow. So,
Yep, it's
just to
just like
piggyback on
Dory.
what Joy said,
It's
just
just like
keep
Dory from
swimming.
Finding Nemo. Just keep swimming,
Keeps,
swimming, swimming.
yep, this is true, you guys. It's very true. Joy is very wise. Just listen to Joy. So we're going to come now to this year, March 5th of 2024, less than 2 months after the Los Angeles Innocence Project took up the case of convicted murderer Scott Peterson. A judge in San Mateo County, California, has scheduled a status hearing. The court confirmed Peterson will be represented by the LA Innocence Project, and it is believed the status hearing will be in response to the group requesting new evidence from the original trial in an attempt to exonerate Peterson. Peterson will appear remotely for the hearing, according to the court. His LA Innocence Project counsel will be in person before Judge Elizabeth Hill. In their filing, which ABC News reported on in January, attorneys with the LA Innocence Project claimed that Scott Peterson's state and federal constitutional rights were violated, including a claim of actual innocence that is supported by newly discovered evidence, according to the court filings. New evidence now supports Mr. Peterson's long-standing claim of innocence and raises many questions into who abducted and killed Laci and Connor Peterson, the filings state. His attorneys are seeking dozens of items they say they could not locate after reviewing the trial files from his prior counsel. The items include evidence from the investigations into a December 2002 burglary of a home across the street from the Petersons in Modesto, Laci's missing Croton watch, and a van fire in the airport district on December 25th, 2002, according to the filings. They are also seeking documents from interviews with several witnesses. Paula Mitchell, the director of the LA Innocence Project, previously said she found deficiencies while reviewing the discovery of Scott Peterson's case. In 2020, the California Supreme Court overturned Scott Peterson's death sentence, citing that his jury was improperly screened for bias against the death penalty, according to court documents. Scott Peterson was resentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole in December 2021 and moved off death row in October 2022.
Wow.
So,
Wow. I gotta tell ya, I believe, okay, once in a while you'll see a news story that will have someone who is released from prison after serving 35 years for the rape and murder or some heinous crime that they found DNA evidence that does not link that person. And there'll be like this big deal, and there'll be a press conference, and they'll release all the evidence and the findings, and they'll put the new person in jail. And everyone feels so sorry for the guy or the gal. Usually it's a guy who spent 35 years, and usually it's, let's face it, it's a person of color. Um, and they'll
mhm.
say, oh, it's such a shame. And then they'll interview this person and they'll say, I, 35 years of my life was stolen from me. I just want to move forward and rebuild a new life. And everyone feels sorry for that guy because, or gal, because they spent 35 years in prison. Okay.
Mhm.
And in that instance, something like the LA Innocence Project is great. However, I'm just going to say that one of the things I find really, really, really upsetting about these innocence projects is, for example, Bill Cosby. They found an inconsistency of some sort, which turned his life imprisonment for multiple druggings and rapes of women um into a 3-year sentence, and now he's out.
Mm-hmm.
So I just have to tell you that, are we looking for minor detailed inconsistencies that would overturn certain laws? Or are we looking at the bigger picture, which is this dude is a fucking murderer and he killed his wife and baby and should spend the rest of his natural born life in prison?
Mm-hmm.
And if history teaches us anything, when you look at other people who've done similar crimes, there's a pattern here. And the pattern is, I don't want to be married to Laci. I don't want to be Laci's baby daddy. And I don't want the added responsibility. Chris Watts did the same thing. Young, middle aged, like not middle aged, young white male with a lot of financial burden and the inability to make enough money to out get out from underneath a problem. Money is really a huge component. Scott Peterson, the exact same thing. And so
Mm-hmm.
they got to where they felt like they were at the end of the rope. I don't care about the LA Innocence Project. I'm sure they're great, and I'm sure they've helped one or two people get out of prison, or maybe five who shouldn't be there. But
Right.
what are we doing barking up Scott Peterson's tree?
Right. Um, yeah, and the other common theme is that they were Shanann Watts was pregnant, Laci was
Yep.
pregnant. So that all ties into financial as well, because they see this baby as a financial burden. But I did read somewhere that Scott didn't even want children. So he was hoping, he told someone that he was hoping for infertility. Um,
God.
so yeah.
Anyway, it is a lot of things that lead up to, somebody just feeling like they were being suffocated and taking the matters in their own hands, and all of their decisions were dumb, dumb, stupid, and dumb. And I also have to just throw in there, San Quentin is 432-acre prison. It's the oldest and only death row men's prison in California. It sits on this prime real estate on the north side of the San Francisco Bay in Marin County, California. And if you take the ferry from Larkspur Landing to the ferry terminal at the San Francisco uh, pier, the ferry goes right past the yard at San Quentin, and you can
Oh my
wave.
gosh.
Oh, yeah, I've done it multiple times. You can wave to the inmates as they're out in the yard exercising and hanging out. And
Wow.
they're recognizable because they're standing in a yard with high fences and guard towers and barbed wire around the top, and a building that is very recognizably a prison. And also,
Right.
they're wearing orange
Yeah.
jumpsuits. So
Right.
that gives you another indication that it's a prison. And inevitably, tourists will ask when you're going by, "What's that?" And every time they ask them, like, someone will always tell them, and then they get like the heebie jeebies. And I'm like, well, and then inevitably, the tourists will start flipping the people off in the yard and say things like, "Enjoy the rest of your life in prison," which it's like, really? Do you really want to
Oh God.
antagonize those
Right.
people? It's like, come on. But anyway, it is, I will tell you this. If you're in San Quentin and you get to go out in the yard, you got a really nice view. I mean, it's absolutely picturesque. But every time I would take the ferry across there, Cheryl, which is like every other summer, at least for the last 11 years, um, I I would think to myself, you know what? Scott Peterson's probably standing in that yard.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh yeah.
That's creepy.
That's the other thing, Cheryl, is he has to live with himself. And if you want to, I'm sure he spends a lot of time telling himself he didn't do anything wrong.
Hmm.
starting with getting a new girlfriend and all that. That's the other thing that's so crazy is what is it about these crimes and running out and getting a girlfriend? I'm just like, I mean,
That's
those
that's what
girlfriends
I'm
have
thinking
to
about.
know. They have to know that they were the ones that got away because if they had not been found out, those girlfriends would have been next.
Yeah, that's and she does say that. Amber Frey does say that in one of the things that I read that she said that could have
Yep.
been me. I'm still like astounded. I'm just baffled at the time at how quick. Well, okay, it was very he met Amber Frey in 2002 November, and a month later Laci is killed. Now, maybe he was already feeling something before he met Amber and then that pushed him over the edge. Do you think maybe that's it? Because to me,
No,
it couldn't it,
I think he had already made a plan to get out. And he needed a new relationship to kickstart the process.
yeah, that's what I mean. That was like
Yeah.
yeah, he was already feeling it and then it was like, well, this is it. I definitely want to get out now because now I got this,
This
you know.
this is called moral bankruptcy. And
Yeah,
if you or
right?
anyone you know is involved in any of this shit, you are a morally bankrupt person.
Right.
I
No
mean,
kidding.
it's like to me it's just black and white. I don't know if Scott Peterson operates in a world where there's a lot of gray and sepia tones and pastels, but I'm in a black and white universe. And that is, he is a
That
morally
shit is
bankrupt
wrong.
person. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I just have a lot of questions. I just wonder if it was premeditated, like he planned it out that day because it was Christmas Eve, where people are going to be expecting her. Again, I'm just playing devil's advocate or I'm just wanting to have a well rounded discussion. So
Yeah. I
his
feel like
behavior
most of these people are sloppy. It's
is that what
very
you think?
sloppy.
Well,
Yeah.
I think it had to. I don't think you would have planned something for Christmas Eve because everybody's expecting her to see her. I think maybe it was probably a momentary, not momentary, in the moment thing. I mean, he had already been feeling all this stuff, but probably in the moment. The other question I have is why their dog was walking around on the street. Because see, that's why a lot of people are like, no, she was kidnapped. There was a burglary across the street. There was a van that was burning the next day. So there's theories that it was the the burglars across the street. So there's just
I'm
a lot of
less
things.
I'm less concerned about the dog
But
because
how do
I
you think?
have
Why do you
2
think the dog
dogs
was?
and I know that the dogs can get out.
Yeah,
Sometimes the gardener comes and leaves the gate open and the dogs push their way out. Sometimes the door is open and the cat's on the front stoop and the dog chases the cat out. Sometimes you're walking the dog and it slips the leash. I mean, he could have let the dog out and the dog just, he was busy dealing with trying to get a body out of the house that was
yeah,
like
that's what. Yeah, I'm
obviously
thinking, and
8.5 months pregnant. He doesn't give a shit about her dog.
but the dog. Yeah, no,
That's
I
the
get
other
it.
thing is if you can kill your wife, you're not going to
You don't
care
care
about
about
your
the
dog.
dog.
Yeah.
It's just that there's a lot of and I think that's why the LA Innocence Project looked into it because there are some question questions or holes, because this was largely circumstantial. They didn't have any DNA, they didn't have any of that. So I think that's why there is a group, that wants to take a second look at it. I think his
Yeah.
behavior speaks for itself. I mean, OJ, saying that he just wanted to go to Nicole's grave, and that's why he was in the Bronco that Al Collins was driving. He said he just
Mhm.
wanted to go to her grave with a disguise and money and like $10,000 cash. I mean, like, you know what I mean? It's just like so. It's
Yeah,
it's good.
the cash is always so telling.
Yeah. I mean, why? Why would you
You're
need to?
gonna need a lot of cash to like pay for stuff over what the next 6 months, year, whatever.
Right. Yeah.
I
It's
don't know.
certainly
Very
not using it to tip anybody through the drive-through.
Right?
But in OJ's case, they also had DNA and a lot of blood evidence and a lot of other stuff. And that guy got off scot. Well, he didn't totally get off scot free. He was found
He
civilly
didn't get off
responsible.
scot free. He got off Scott Peterson.
God. Jeez, please.
Sorry, I couldn't help it. Well, Cheryl,
Oh,
this is a horrible, horrible, horrible crime.
it is.
I'm glad he didn't get away with this crime. But you know what else is a crime?
What's that, Joy?
That we are out of time.
That is a crime. Well, thank you for listening, everyone, and don't complicate your day. All creativity, commentary, and opinions in this podcast belong to Cheryl and Joy. Music composed and mixed by Gabe McKeon. Logo and merch created and managed by Kevin Callan. Podcast editing and advertising by Joy McKeon. Legal representation provided by John Bojezek. Please like, subscribe, follow, and listen. You can listen to us on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. And remember, you can find us on Instagram and YouTube, and you can email us at murderandeverythingelse@gmail.com.
Bye, fishes.